Shanghai is one of the largest and most futuristic cities on Earth, but it's also a place where Google, Instagram, Gmail, and almost all the apps we use every day simply don't work. So, what is it actually like to navigate this cashless megacity as a foreigner? To find out, I spent 10 days slow traveling around Shanghai, tracking every expense, riding shared bikes, and working from local cafes. I expected nothing but a hypermodern tech hub, but what completely surprised me was how quickly those giant glass towers turn into narrow local alleys and traditional markets that feel entirely different from the image most people have of China. In this video, I'll break down exactly how much I spent on accommodation, food, coffee, insurance, transport, and everything else. But more importantly, I'll show you how to make your own trip seamless, from mastering mobile payments without a local bank account, to bypassing blocked websites and the essential apps you must download before you arrive. So, let's get into it. But before we get into prices, food, neighborhoods, or all the apps you need before coming to China, I want to start with my first impressions of Shanghai and China in general. Because honestly, before visiting, I wasn't sure what to expect. The first thing that shocked me happened almost immediately after arriving in central Shanghai. The silence. And I know that sounds strange when we're talking about the second largest city in the world, especially after flying in from Vietnam. I stepped outside and thought, wait, where is all the chaos? There were millions of people, endless skyscrapers, busy roads, huge intersections, but somehow the city felt unusually quiet, like someone had turned the volume down on a megacity. A big reason for that is electric transport. Cars, buses, scooters, delivery bikes. Everything is electric. China has pushed electric vehicle adoption extremely aggressively in recent years, and you notice it immediately. In fact, there are now more than 100 domestic electric car brands competing in the market, which also makes them very affordable. And you'll constantly see green license plates everywhere, reserved for electric vehicles. Another thing that's hard to grasp until you see it is the scale of Shanghai. Everything feels bigger than expected. Roads, metro stations, shopping malls, residential compounds. Even after 10 days, I still found myself looking up at buildings wondering how a city this large actually runs so smoothly. And despite all that concrete and glass, Shanghai is also one of the greenest megacities I've visited. Parks, trees, and green spaces appear everywhere, and it makes the city feel much more livable than you'd expect at this scale. One thing that stood out to me immediately was how practical the city feels in everyday life. Public toilets are everywhere, and they're not only free but also surprisingly spotless. The same goes for the overall cleanliness of the streets. It genuinely feels maintained at a very high standard. On top of that, there's a strong sense of security everywhere you go, with cameras on almost every corner, as well as visible police stations and patrol cars, which together make the city feel extremely controlled and safe. Another thing I really liked about Shanghai is how well connected it is. Shanghai Pudong International Airport is extremely modern, high-tech, and offers direct connections to destinations all over the world. And for domestic travel, China's high-speed rail network is honestly hard to beat. The bullet trains are affordable, comfortable, incredibly fast, and a greener alternative to flying. You can travel from Shanghai to Beijing or reach smaller cities and rural areas in just a matter of hours. Another stereotype that completely disappeared for me was the idea that Chinese people are cold or unfriendly. My experience was the opposite. Yes, there's a language barrier at times, but translation apps make things much easier, and people genuinely try to help whenever they can. Locals might not always smile at strangers in the same way as in some Western countries, but the moment you smile first, the response is usually immediate. And that's probably what surprised me most about Shanghai. On paper, it sounds overwhelming. A huge city, a different language, different apps, different systems, a completely different culture. But once you're actually here, it feels much more approachable than you'd expect. In fact, after just a few days, I started to understand why so many people become fascinated with China. It's one of those places that keeps surprising you, often in ways you never predicted. Before we talk about accommodation, food, transportation, and prices, there's something much more important: your digital setup. In my opinion, this is probably the most important part of a China trip. As you probably know, many of the apps we use every day don't work here. Gmail, WhatsApp, Instagram, GitHub, and Slack, among many others, are either blocked or partially restricted. So before flying to China, the first thing I recommend is getting an eSIM. And this is important. Make sure you buy and activate it before landing. Once you're already connected to Chinese mobile networks, setting things up becomes much more complicated. Most travel eSIMs route through places like Hong Kong or Singapore, which allows them to bypass the Great Firewall automatically. The result is that your phone basically works the same as back home. You open Google Maps or YouTube and everything just works. If you're planning to work from a laptop though, that's a different story. In that case, I highly recommend installing a reliable VPN before arriving. Most expats, remote workers, and slow travelers use one, because without it, many websites and services you normally rely on simply won't be accessible. Once your internet setup is sorted, the next essential app is Alipay. Honestly, it's probably the single most useful app in China. Download it before you arrive, connect your Visa or MasterCard, complete the verification process, upload your passport if needed, and make sure everything is working properly. Because once Alipay is set up, you're basically ready for daily life in China. You can even scan restaurant menus to pay for food, coffee, and groceries, or use your phone for metro rides, taxis, bike rentals, basically everything. China is essentially a cashless society at this point. I haven't seen any physical cash during my trip, except once in a temple where some people had left money as an offering next to a Buddha statue. Even small street vendors prefer QR code payments over cash. For transportation, you'll use Didi, which is basically China's version of Uber, and Hello Bike for short rides, especially with the endless bike lanes across the cities. The good thing is, you don't even need separate apps, because both are integrated directly into Alipay, which is exactly what I ended up using most of the time. Another essential app is Amap. Apple Maps works surprisingly well, but Google Maps feels outdated in China. Many restaurants are missing, street data isn't always accurate, and reviews are limited. Amap, on the other hand, is built specifically for China. It's extremely detailed, shows real-time public transport routes, walking directions, businesses, reviews, and basically everything you need. After a day or two, it became my main navigation app. Next is Trip.com. Since booking and Airbnb are either limited or not as useful here, many hotels list their properties on Trip instead. Since it's a Chinese company, it's often cheaper and has more reviews than other platforms. But more importantly, it's also one of the best ways for foreigners to book bullet trains and regional bus tickets in China. Then there's WeChat. Unfortunately, I never fully managed to set it up. The registration process can be tricky, and in some cases, new accounts require verification from an existing user. At first, I didn't think it was a big deal, but later I realized I was missing opportunities to stay in touch with locals I met along the way. In China, WeChat is much more than a messaging app. It's basically part of everyday life. I ended up exchanging email addresses with a few locals instead, which was honestly a funny experience. Imagine meeting someone in a coffee shop and then emailing them later to ask if they want to grab dinner. It felt like going back 20 years, but somehow it worked. Those are the main apps I used during my trip, but if you've been to China and think I missed something useful, let me know in the comments. It'll help future travelers prepare a bit better before they arrive. One thing you quickly realize about Shanghai is that it's so large that choosing the perfect neighborhood isn't nearly as important as many people think. As long as you stay somewhere reasonably central and close to a metro line, you'll be fine. No matter where you stay, you'll probably use public transport every day anyway. Shanghai is simply too big to comfortably explore on foot like many other cities. For my 10 days in Shanghai, I stayed in Jing'an district in the Fangguanong area. The location turned out to be incredibly convenient. Despite feeling quite local and quiet, I was only about a 5-minute walk from Shanghai Railway Station, one of the city's main transport hubs. From there, I had direct access to Metro Lines 1, 3, and 4, which made getting around extremely easy. I could reach most parts of central Shanghai without much planning. The room itself was simple, but better than I expected for the price. It was bright, clean, fairly spacious, had a good shower, daily housekeeping, basic toiletries, and the staff were always friendly and helpful. I paid 122 Chinese yuan per night, which is roughly 17 US dollars, and honestly, considering the location and overall quality, I was very happy with it. Of course, accommodation prices in Shanghai vary massively. You can easily spend several times more if you're looking for a larger apartment or a hotel in one of the more upscale areas. When it comes to neighborhoods, Jing'an is probably one of the most balanced choices. It's central, well-connected, walkable, and filled with cafes, restaurants, shopping malls, and co-working spaces. Another popular area among foreigners is the former French Concession. It's one of the most charming parts of the city, with tree-lined streets, historic buildings, and a much more relaxed atmosphere. It feels very different from the futuristic image most people associate with Shanghai. For most visitors, I'd focus less on finding the perfect area and more on staying close to a metro station. In Shanghai, that's what really shapes your day-to-day experience. Food in Shanghai is one of those things that constantly switches between extremes. One moment you're eating a full meal for $2, the next, you're sitting in a modern cafe paying almost Western prices, and that contrast is actually what makes the food scene so interesting. Let's start with the basics. In local neighborhoods, everyday food is still very cheap. A quick breakfast from a street stall or small local restaurant usually costs around 10 to 20 yuan. Things like steamed buns, soy milk, or simple pancakes are everywhere. One of the most common meals you'll see is dumplings. A small portion of pan-fried or soup dumplings usually costs around 20 to 30 yuan, depending on the place, and that's often already enough for a full meal. Noodle bowls are another staple. You'll find everything from simple clear broth noodles to richer pork or beef versions. Most local noodle shops charge around 20 to 25 for a solid bowl. Nothing fancy, but very filling, and something locals actually eat daily. Then, there are the more classic Shanghai dishes: soup dumplings, scallion oil noodles, pan-fried buns. You don't really need to remember the names, but you'll see them everywhere. They're cheap, quick, and usually eaten on the go. What surprised me most is that even in a massive city like Shanghai, you can still eat very well for under 30 per meal if you stick to local places. On the other side, supermarkets like 7-Eleven, Family Mart, and larger grocery stores are clean, modern, and very well organized. You'll find everything from fresh fruit and vegetables to ready-made meals and imported products. Local items are still reasonably priced, but imported goods are noticeably more expensive. Then there's the completely different world of Western-style cafes, brunch spots, and international restaurants. So if you feel like splurging, you can go from budget meals to very high-end dining. Shanghai's got you covered. Your daily food cost in Shanghai really depends on how you move between these two worlds. I personally stayed somewhere in the middle and spent around 80 yuan per day, which felt like a very comfortable balance. Getting around Shanghai is one of the easiest parts of living here, mainly because the transport system is not only huge, but also extremely efficient and very cheap for a city of this size. The backbone of everything is the metro. With over 520 stations, it's the largest metro network in the world and connects basically every part of the city you'll realistically need to go to. It's fast, clean, clearly signposted in both English and Chinese, and surprisingly easy to understand even on your first day. Most rides cost around 3 to 7 yuan depending on distance. Even cross-city trips usually stay under 10, which is honestly crazy for a city this large. Once you figure it out, it quickly becomes your default way of moving around. Then, there is the vast network of electric buses. They cover areas the metro doesn't reach, and everything is fully integrated into the same digital payment system. You just tap your phone and go. No tickets, no cash, no confusion. For shorter distances, Didi Taxi is the next option. It's basically the Chinese version of Uber, but cheaper and more integrated into daily life. Short rides usually cost around 15 to 40 yuan, depending on distance and traffic. Even longer cross-district rides are still very reasonable compared to most global cities. Then there's something you'll see everywhere in Shanghai: colorful shared bicycles. They're parked on almost every corner of the city. You unlock them by scanning a QR code with Alipay, ride them for short distances, and simply leave them at your destination. It usually costs around 2 to 3 yuan per ride, sometimes even less. And honestly, bikes are one of the best ways to experience the city. Shanghai is very flat, and many areas are designed with cycling in mind, especially around parks, rivers, and residential neighborhoods. What makes everything even smoother is how fully digital the entire system is. Whether you're taking the metro, a bus, a taxi, or a bike, everything connects through your phone. No cards, no cash, no physical tickets, just scan and go. After a few days, it all becomes completely natural. If you work remotely, Shanghai is one of those cities that just makes it easy. Not because it's designed as a digital nomad hub, but because coffee culture here has developed quickly and on a serious level. You'll find specialty coffee everywhere, and I don't just mean a few trendy cafes in one district. I mean entire streets filled with independent coffee shops, chains, and hybrid spaces where people sit for hours working on laptops. One of the most common chains you'll see is Luckin Coffee. It's basically everywhere in the city. It's fast, cheap, and fully app-based. You order from your phone, walk in, pick it up, and leave. An Americano there usually costs around 15 to 20 yuan, while an oat milk latte is slightly more, around 20 to 30 depending on promotions. It's not third-wave coffee, but it's consistent, convenient, and almost impossible to avoid in Shanghai. Then you have a different level, smaller specialty cafes and local roasters. Here, the atmosphere changes completely. People stay longer, work on laptops, take calls, and actually spend hours inside. Coffee quality is higher, but prices also go up. An Americano is usually around 30 to 45, especially in central areas. What's interesting is how normal remote work feels here. It's very common to see people working on laptops in cafes, locals, expats, freelancers, students. It's a mix of everything. Many people also run VPNs in the background to access international tools, and after a while, it just becomes part of the routine. You sit down, connect, and start working like anywhere else. One of my favorite things to do in Shanghai is very simple. Just walk around the city with a cup of coffee and do nothing. Just watching people and the rhythm of daily life. Street art, museums, quiet streets, massive architecture. The city constantly shifts depending on where you are. On one side, there's the slower, more historical version of the city. You've got traditional temples, old gardens like Yu Garden, and places like Tianzifang, where narrow alleys are filled with small shops, art spaces, and cafes. These areas feel completely different from the modern skyline and give you a glimpse of older Shanghai. There are also museums and art galleries, including the Shanghai Art Museum, many of which are free or very affordable. Even in a city this dense, it's surprisingly easy to find quiet parks and green spaces where people come to walk, do tai chi, play music, or just sit and relax. That contrast between skyscrapers and calm public spaces is something you notice everywhere. And then there's the architecture itself. It's a mix of ultra-modern skyscrapers, colonial-era buildings, and older monumental structures that sometimes feel almost Soviet in scale. At moments, if you ignore the Chinese signs, parts of the city could easily feel like Madrid or another major European city until you look again and realize where you are. Then there's the social and entertainment side of Shanghai. The nightlife here is very active, but it's not concentrated in just one district. You'll find everything from small local bars to high-end rooftop venues and massive club spaces spread across the city. One of the most interesting places I visited was INS Land, a multi-floor super club located near Fuxing Park. Entry is usually around 170 to 310 yuan, depending on the day of week. And honestly, it's worth experiencing at least once. Drink prices vary a lot depending on where you go. In local bars, a beer is usually around 30 to 50. In upscale rooftop bars or clubs, cocktails can easily go from 100 to 150 or more. If I had to highlight a few must-visit places, I would say Yew Garden for traditional Shanghai, Tianzifang for artsy alleyways and cafes, the Bund for skyline views, and Jinggan area just for walking around modern city life and cafes. Each one shows a completely different side of the city. Now let's talk about the actual numbers. What you're seeing on screen is everything I spent in Shanghai over 10 days. I broke down all my expenses: food, accommodation, transport, coffee, insurance, and all the small daily costs you usually don't notice until they add up. Of course, you can do it much cheaper if you stick to local food, avoid Western cafes, and choose simpler accommodation. But you can also easily spend much more if you go for comfort, nicer apartments, and more frequent dining out. In total, I spent around 3,750 yuan over 10 days, which is roughly $520. For me, this felt like a pretty realistic mid-range budget for Shanghai. It's not the cheapest city in Asia, but it's also not as expensive as many people assume, especially once you understand how local life actually works here. If you had a different experience in Shanghai, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Before buying your tickets to China, always check your visa requirements first, because it depends heavily on your passport and nationality. Most travelers from countries like the US, UK, Canada, and most of Europe still need to apply for a tourist visa in advance. This is usually done through a Chinese embassy or visa center in your country, and it involves basic paperwork such as your passport, application form, photo, travel insurance, return tickets, and proof of accommodation. There are also visa-free transit options, usually 24 or 72 hours, but only if you are continuing on to a third country and meet the requirements. And for some nationalities, such as Australia in certain cases, China also offers short-term visa-free entry, usually up to 15 days, depending on current agreements. But this can change, so it's always worth double-checking before you travel. So the simple rule is, most people still need to apply for a visa in advance unless they specifically qualify for a transit or short-term exemption. Another thing is insurance. Even though healthcare in China is relatively affordable, I still wouldn't travel without coverage. Personally, I use Safety Wing. It cost me around $21 for these 10 days. It's easy to manage online, and so far I've had a good experience with it. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description. Shanghai is not an easy city at first. It looks extremely modern and polished from the outside, but once you actually live here, reality becomes a mix of excitement and constant adjustment. The biggest thing is the pace. Everything moves fast, people walk fast, services are fast, decisions are fast. At first, it can feel overwhelming, especially if you're coming from slower cities in Southeast Asia or Europe, but you slowly adapt to it. Then there's the language barrier. In central areas, you'll find some English, especially in hotels and cafes, but daily life is still mostly in Chinese. Signs, menus, and everyday interactions are often fully Chinese, so translation apps become essential. They actually help a lot and make most situations completely manageable. Weather is another thing that catches you off guard. It can switch quickly, hot and humid one week, then suddenly cold, rainy, and windy the next. You really feel the seasonal changes here. Culturally, there's also an adjustment period. Things don't always work the way you expect if you're coming from the West. Systems are different, communication is different, and you quickly learn to adapt instead of relying on familiarity. In some situations, people can also feel quite reserved or closed compared to what you might be used to. But that's also where Shanghai becomes interesting, because once you get past that initial friction, you start to understand why so many people come here for work and opportunity. The city is highly efficient, extremely organized in many ways, and full of industries moving fast: business, tech, finance, content creation. I personally loved Shanghai, and I'm already looking forward to coming back and exploring it even more.